Lumen Brothers. Light talk. Light talk. Light talk. Lumen Brothers. Light talk.
Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Zach coming to you from Washington, D.C. And today we are discussing the weather, travel tips, art versus flash and trash, and obnoxious strobes, all on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. That's right. Welcome, everyone, to episode 250. And let me tell you guys, it's good to be back here with my brothers, Zach and Steve. By the way, guys, great interview with Jeremy Hobgood last week. That was a great interview.
Thank you.
Loved it.
Well, hang on. Do you have like an unfiltered Camel and a scotch in your hand? What's up with this Jessica Rabbit voice?
Well, okay. As many of you know, I've had spinal surgery like 3.5 weeks ago, and I am recovering. But because of the way they did the surgery, they actually went in through my throat. But they go in through the front, and then they move all the organs aside. They move the tongue aside. They move the vocal cords. They move the esophagus. They move, all the gack that's in your throat. They move around. And they also put a ventilator down your air pipe because you're basically on the table for 3 hours. But it's like the worst sore throat ever. And there is a chance that this may be permanent. My voice, we don't know yet. It's going to take a while. But I kind of feel sexy, in this voice. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Light Talk after hours now.
This could be, I could be like, after hours. Like, what was it, Playboy After Hours?
Right, exactly.
Sort of a cross between like a bad 70s underground DJ and Marty Funkhauser. I have that voice going there. So, but anyway, the people at Cedars were amazing. Kudos to that medical staff. Like I said, I had this done at Cedars-Sinai in LA, and my neurosurgeon, Dr. Corey Walker, is the bomb. So I'm just really, really happy with it, and we'll know more. But I was walking the day I got out of the hospital. It was crazy. I walk about 2 hours a day now, and and they say that's the best way of recovering. So tomorrow I go in for my first checkup, and I hope he clears me for sex. That's all I have to say, because they do this in sections. You get cleared for like computer work, you get cleared for driving. This is a big milestone that I have to clear.
That's the first milestone.
So, there you go.
Right. You might be cleared for it. It doesn't mean that everyone else is ready for that milestone.
That's true. So everybody, please excuse my voice. I'm doing the best I can. And my great brothers here are going to pretty much take the lead on this show so that I don't lose my voice during all this. Oh, it's so good. It's good to be back. So, hey, guys, what do you think? I think we have some news coming up, don't we?
Absolutely. Boy, we have all kinds of news, and it seems to be all tragic news. Bob Saget, young man, just wonderful actor, passes away. And Michael Lang, the creator of Woodstock, has passed away.
He changed the entire music industry, certainly the live music industry. I remember when Josh White was on the show, and he was talking about the death of the Fillmore, and it was pretty much because of Woodstock and all the big festivals. But
Right.
but for those who don't know who Michael Lang is, watch the original Woodstock film, preferably the director's cut, which is great. And he's featured throughout the whole thing. He's this young guy with curly hair, and he's always driving a motorcycle.
Right. And he's like wearing a leather vest.
Yeah, right.
I think
So were we.
I think his big famous quote was when he saw the kids starting to tear the fences down, he just shrugged his shoulders and said, "I guess it's a free concert now."
That was so cool. He was able to like look at the bright side of it, you know,
Yeah.
because right before that, they were talking about how much money they were going to lose on the festival, that they were basically all going to go bankrupt. And then somebody came up and says, "I got some really bad news. They're tearing the fences down." And like Zach said, he said, "Hey, I guess it's a free concert now. Far out." That was so cool.
Yeah, I think there's a shot of him there with Chip
Yes,
Muck.
lots
Yeah.
of shots of Chip. Yeah,
And,
pretty cool.
and of course, again, Sidney Poitier passes away.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
A great American actor who really bent. I mean, he broke so many rules in Hollywood.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. It's amazing to think that back when he was, not only did he sort of break through the ceiling there, that at that time he was the #1 box office star, and he had 3 blockbuster movies in 1 year. But then it was 37 years until another person of color won an Academy Award for Best Actor.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, In the Heat of the Night, and To Sir with Love. I remember
Right.
seeing all 3 of those.
Right.
I don't know what my parents were thinking. They took me to see these movies when I was 12 or 13 years old, and they were just amazing to watch them on screen.
I like your parents for that.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, he tells this great story about when he was first trying to become successful in Hollywood. He went to acting class, and I believe it was John Houseman, but I may be wrong. But the acting teacher told him, "You're terrible. You can't act. You've got a horrible accent," because he was Bahamian. He came from the Bahamas. He goes, and he kicked him out of class. He basically just kicked him out of class. And his perseverance, made him get better and better and better
Right.
and better and better. He didn't quit. He could have easily walked away, but he didn't quit, and he became Sidney Poitier. He became one of the greatest American actors in
Yeah.
our history. So that's a great lesson to all the young people out there, is no matter what jerk tells you that you don't have talent, as long as you believe, then you keep going.
Well, and of course, Tharon Musser. We were just, January the 8th, we were celebrating her birthday, 1925. She passed away in April of 2009. 150 Broadway productions. Just an amazing person. Just an amazing person. I got to meet her once, and she came up to me and she critiqued my work on Jose Limon, because she had been Limon's designer. And she was so gracious and generous and wonderful and kind and interested. I mean, it was just a wonderful experience to hear what she had to say.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again, because she was such a major force in my life, because she's the one who told me not to go to Yale, to go to SMU, because Bill and Jean Eckhart was teaching there, and that because I was so heavily influenced in music, that she knew that they would allow me to continue my music studies, but Yale would not. And that changed everything for me. So I have a lot to thank her for.
She's another one that Broadway dimmed their lights for.
Well, all those shows she did with Bill and Jean and George Abbott, I mean, come on. Once Upon a Mattress, Damn Yankees, Mame, you go on and on and on and on of all the great Broadway musicals of the 50s and 60s. They call it the golden age of Broadway. They were responsible. And a little not so well kept secret anymore. Bill and Jean helped her pass her union exam because she did not know how to paint. So,
but that was also back in the day when it was an all categories exam. She did it all.
Well, she didn't do it all. Let's just say
she did it all on the exam.
On the exam. So, thank you, Bill and Jean Eckhart.
Zach, you've got some news too, I think.
Yes. Also in the news, we have the January 6th memorial hosted by the DNC. We posted on our Facebook group about the horrible lighting on Nancy
God,
Pelosi.
it was awful.
Has anyone taken credit for that yet? Is that on someone's resume?
I hope not. It was pathetic. And it wasn't just Nancy. We got to be fair. Everybody looked horrible.
Yeah, let's
everybody
be fair.
looked horrible on that. It was
a poorly
was
lit
no
event,
front light.
let's say.
They had lit her from like high side at like 45, right? And you could see it. You could actually see the shadows, that her jewelry is making. And they're in 45-degree angles, high side and a backlight. And that was it. It was just hard. No front fill whatsoever. Not good. Not good. And I did a little bit of research. I called some of our friends who are pretty high up in the broadcast lighting world about this. And we have some quotes. One was, "You are incorrect, however. The lighting was not terrible. It was beyond terrible. Calling it terrible is an insult to all the terrible lighting I witness almost every day. This was inexcusably, outrageously, horrendously, and appallingly atrocious. There's no excuse for how bad the lighting made Nancy Pelosi look in those photos." And then I asked this person, how could the director allow it? And he said, well, first of all, you're assuming there's actually a real director. There often isn't any more on press events like this. Sadly, there may have been someone who's switching cameras who may have been called the director, but that was a name only to fill a blank slot on the crew sheet. Most of these type directors have the artistic sensibility of a rock and don't recognize the difference between good pictures and bad ones. I'm guessing there was no lighting designer other than the person whose name filled in the lighting guy blank on that crew sheet. He merely put up a bunch of lights. So, and then he also said, I feel like our worst intern on their worst day would have done a better job than this. I think that they need to really look at that because that was a huge event, super high profile, and it was just unfortunate.
Maybe we'll give them a benefit of the doubt. Maybe their front light just went boom before the camera switched on. Maybe we're seeing a salvage operation here.
I mean, maybe if you really want to give them the benefit of the doubt, they lit it for radio.
That's closer. But Steve, going to your comment about maybe the front light went out. I used to light events like this, press events for Disney. And Michael Eisner would come out and it'd be a big press event like this. And it was live and it was national. And we had front light, we had all the angles covered, but we also had backups for everything. I mean, basically everything was lit with 2 sets of lamps, 2 sets of controllers, and 2 sets of power sources. So if a lamp went out, that other lamp was there. So you don't do a live event like this with with something that could be, someone could pull the plug out and then your front light goes out. I was talking to this lighting professional, and he thought that they just didn't hang anything out front. That's true. All right. Hey, let's get on with the show, okay? Steve has our first question of the day.
Yes, and it comes from the Republic right here, San Antonio. It is Haley. And Haley asks, do you think the use of strobes in concerts have run their course and it's now over? Okay.
As long as there's drugs, there'll always be strobes.
Okay, here's what I think. I think there's a possibility that the strobe has run its course, and that's simply because all moving lights now have a strobe capability on board. So I think David's right. I think the flashing of a strobe, it's like playing the national anthem at the ball games. We are always going to see a strobe at a concert. The question is, are we doing anything to make the concerts more safe for people who are affected by strobes? But I think the strobe is with us. It's nice. Not gone the way of the buffalo. The moving lights have replaced it. So maybe you don't have to buy 2 pieces of equipment. What do you think, Zach, in your world of projection and lighting design there?
It's interesting the way that you've broken down that question, because strobes, it's a term that can mean multiple things. So technically, it's a specific kind of light that can flash on and off. And also, it's now become synonymous with the effect of lights flashing on and off. So I think that as a storytelling device, that idea of the light flashing on and off is still has some life left in it. Like in Rock of Ages, we used it for a scene where we wanted things to sort of appear as if they were happening in slow motion. And it's just like a fun theatrical effect. But what you're saying is absolutely true, that now with the way different lighting fixtures and projection equipment and all these kinds of display equipments have advanced, that they're all capable of reproducing that strobe effect. And we're no longer really dependent on the old-fashioned strobe light that can flash on and off to create that effect. But I do think that part of the idea of like using the strobe to blind the audience, like it still makes the kids go wild. And I think that we're not going to see that go away anytime soon, because it generates a kind of excitement that I think is still part of our visual vocabulary.
What do you think, David?
I have a question for Zach. I mean, do you ever strobe your video?
Mm-hmm. Sure. I mean, there's times where you want to do that as a specific effect, from simulating a flash from a photography or
like lightning.
Yeah. There's all kinds of reasons and ways to do it. I think that the trickiness there is, at least in the projector world, it's not as perfectly synchronized as it would be with an LED thing, especially if you're trying to time it to happen with lights and it's all getting pushed by a lighting console. Sometimes you'll see there's like a teeny weeny delay between when the video happens and when the lighting happens. And so sometimes we'll build in a delay in the light cue so that the stage manager will anticipate the cue a hair, and it'll cause both events to happen at the same time and appear in sync.
Can you define teeny weeny?
0.01 seconds.
Okay.
Teeny weeny.
Yeah, but what's the intensity?
Well, I mean, that's the other part of it too. Is like,
is it like full?
In video world now, we have the ability to have things strobe on a curve. So even in half a second, we can have something sort of smoothly fade in and out. And so, like, for instance, if I were simulating flash from a camera, the way that an old-fashioned flash pops, it kind of fades out a little slower than when it comes on. So you might have it go down on a bit of a curve, and also the color would warm up as it fades out, even though that whole event might take 0.3 seconds.
Yeah, we could do that in lighting controllers too.
Right.
But let me tell you guys about my pet peeve, and that's when you have lighting designers or a director saying, we have this lightning storm, so I want the lights flashing, right? So you have this lighting designer going ahead and just taking these random lights and having them flash from different directions and stuff like that, and they think it's a lightning storm. When in fact, to do real lightning, it's usually coming from one, maybe two directions at the most. And it just drives me crazy when I see all these lights randomly flashing, and I'm saying,
right.
Come on, I mean, if you're doing something that's more expressionistic, where yes, it's more of an emotion, that's one thing. But if you're doing like a storm out on sea, then you don't have these 800 directions of light flashing and strobing. But you can shape the strobes, you could shape the flashing, which is really kind of cool. But you also have to be careful, as we all know, about a certain frequency that could set people into some sort of epileptic seizure. So that's always, a lot of boards nowadays, they'll actually warn you, you don't want to be in this frequency.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
So you can avoid it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring up lightning in particular, because that's another place where, as the projection designer, where I have the ability to create with light a graphic image, that I have found that unless it's something that's kind of more almost comical or whimsical, that it's more effective to show the reflection of the lightning and creating how it creates shadows than to show the lightning
Right.
bolt itself.
Right. Right.
It's the way the light
Pretty
reflects
cool.
off of everything else.
Well, David, I think you have our next question.
Doug Feinberg from Cambridge, Mass.
Oh, the Tappert Brothers Fair City.
asks, do you think the bigger touring and Broadway shows are depending on too much spectacle and technology? I recently saw the national tour of the musical Hadestown. It's Hadestown, right? Right. And I was blown away by the technology and not so impressed with the story or the score. The crew is touring with a rotating stage, moving scenery, many different smoke haze effects, many moving lights, etc. Our producers and directors pushing designers to use more effects. It's certainly driving costs up. And as much as I like theater tech, I would trade some of it for a memorable song. My belief is you do a show with a strong script, with strong actors, and the design is there to support it, to support the show, not to take the lead in the show. So do we think that bigger touring and Broadway shows are depending too much on spectacle technology? Yes. I think that shows should be dropped early on if the script does not make it or if the acting doesn't make it. Because I don't know of any show off the top of my head that has had a lasting place in the canon of theater without a good script. What do you think? What do you guys think?
The Magic Show with Doug Henning, does that count?
Well, some shows are supposed to be spectacle. Okay?
Right.
I'm talking about, what Doug is talking about is a more conventional show that is not there. It's not like a show like O, right? An O is
I
spectacle.
think that it is a much bigger challenge for people like us because as lighting and projection designers, a lot of our design happens once we're in the theater, in rehearsal. So it's harder for someone to say, let's go back and build new scenery, or even let's go back to the writer's room and come up with a new song or more script ideas, because they're like, we have these other people here who seem to be able to make changes on a dime. So Zach can come up with some more imagery, and David can come up with a new lighting scenario for that scene. And it's very easy these days for people to think that I'll try to fix this with design once you're in the theater. And I often find myself pushing back with directors, sometimes almost saying maybe before we try to solve that with a visual, let's look at the sound design for this scene, for instance. Like once I remember I was doing a show where we had an outdoor scene and they felt like maybe you can add some more imagery to help it feel like we're outside. And I said, maybe like if we heard a bus go by and we had some like evening atmospheric effects, we'd get that feeling because we've developed this visual language that's very simple and sparse, and that would make it more complicated to do it with imagery. But I definitely think that we're in a day and age where not just producers and directors are pushing for these things, but I am finding a lot of projects that end up on my desk have effects and video and stuff like that in the script. So I think now that people have started to see more of this stuff, that writers are actually thinking about it. I don't know if that's good or bad. I mean, part of it is good because it gets me in the door, and then I can hopefully help craft something that I feel is cohesive and holistic and has a soul so that it fits the story and supports the story like what you're saying. But I think that now there are certain audiences that are expecting spectacle. And I think that for as many people that want that memorable song, there are people that want turntables and smoke and haze.
Well, there's nothing wrong with turntables and smoke and haze, and there's nothing wrong with spectacles as long as it serves the play and helps tell the story.
Well, if you put it into context, in the concert world, so we all go see rock and roll shows, and I have to say I am a fan of Hadestown, but I also have to say I'm going to go after the Genesis concert a little bit. I don't know that you couldn't have put any band underneath that rig and run the exact same light cues. So I think we see this in concerts, maybe a little bit more than we do in the theater. Big, spectacular show, nothing wrong with it, but it leaves you a little, I don't know, a little empty when you leave. It's just there is the standard rock and roll looks. There's the standard color palette. There is the big drop, the big raise. It's just the whole thing. I have to say, we've had some pretty good designers on this show talk about their work in concerts, and their work has always been very first rate. And they have thought about the show, and they've thought about the music, and they've thought about the story they're telling. And, I'm going to go back to, one of my heroes is Stephen Cohen. His work was always first rate, always spectacular, and it was always designed for the band that was underneath the rig, as opposed to the other way around. So I think Doug has a point here. Sometimes we're letting technology take over, and we're letting the console do things. The designer's turning it over to the console to figure out how to make that chase work. And there is some, I don't know, there's something that's being lost.
I definitely agree with that. I think that, I've called it like the Microsoft Officizing of content, because you start to see the same content over and over, and then you discover that, like especially in the media server world, that a lot of the media servers that are used in rock concerts in particular have all this built-in content. And it becomes a lot easier to just use the built-in content and the built-in effects than it does to kind of craft something new. And I've even said, like, when I do a show, let's say it starts to rain and the water ripples, that the media server has a ripple effect in it that I could use, but I really want that ripple to be right for the show and not just the fastest, easiest, cheapest ripple. And hopefully, if my producers are on board, they'll give me a moment to craft something instead of just hit the ripple button. But I think that there is sort of a thing where, like, Hamilton has a turntable, so everybody wants a turntable now. They think, oh, that means if that was successful as a storytelling device, we need it too. That show had projections. We need projections too.
Isn't that interesting? Les Mis also had a turntable.
Yeah, totally.
And everybody wants, everything that's old is new and new is old. And they think success is in the tech, and it's not. It's how you use the turntable. Both Hamilton and Les Mis used the turntable brilliantly, and it worked within the music. When David Corns talks about the design approach and why he chose a turntable, it was about telling the story. It was not about, well, let's just do a turntable because it's neat. And that's really what makes good design. But, I think what Doug, again, is talking about is when you start throwing things at shows. It's like sort of like the Titanic. I think you remember that show on Broadway. It lasted about, I don't know. And then even like Rocky. Rocky was another example, where you just, let's bring the boxing ring out in the audience. Yeah, that was cool. But really, what did it do? It couldn't make that script any better.
Right.
So,
well, Rocky had a very interesting thing when I saw it in Germany, actually, with Driscoll. That there's a scene in the pet store where in Germany there were like 20 fish tanks, and each fish tank had its own individual video content of fish swimming around. And in reality, it was such a minor moment in the show, and scenically, if it was just 20 fish tanks that lit up, that would have been more than enough.
Right.
But instead, I was just looking at them all like, are they moving the same way, or are there different fish?
Yeah. It's kind of gilding the lily when they should have been throwing the money into the script.
Yes.
But that's a whole nother story.
Right. So Ellen in Atlanta writes, do you have any travel tips for flying from gig to gig? This is an excellent question.
It is. I have so many answers. Go, Zach.
Well, I was going to say, I remember I learned early on from the lighting designer Mike Baldessari, who told me that the first thing that you want to think about when you're flying somewhere is, are they expecting you to get off the plane and go right to work?
Oh,
and that
God
if they
forbid.
if they are, which is not unheard of, that you need to consider that differently than if they're thinking about you flying like the day before and staying in the hotel and then going to the job the next day. So I think that the first rule of thumb that I would always say is if you can avoid a red eye, try to avoid it, because when I was young, I used to think they were cool, and then I learned quickly that they were not cool.
Well, also, if you're flying internationally, you need a day or two
Absolutely.
to decompress and to get your body clock in line with jet lag.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you need to think about all those kinds of things. Am I going somewhere that's in a different time zone, and how long will it take for my body to adjust to that? I mean, you have to be reasonable, I think, to a certain extent, because, you can't always like squeeze a vacation in there. But I think that, you want to think about what do I need to do to stay healthy and be able to function at my best. I need to make sure I am having meals. Try to stay on your meal schedule, stay hydrated. One of the things I always talk about when we travel to California from the East Coast is we add an extra meal. So that helps sort of reset your clock. You end up having dinner on East Coast time and then another smaller dinner on West Coast time that tells your body like, okay, this is actually bedtime now. That's one of my tricks that I do. My son, he has a gift for waking up at 6 a.m. everywhere I've traveled all over the world. The first day, he wakes up at 6 a.m. local time. So that's another trick you can do, is bring him with you, like the human alarm clock. But I think stay hydrated, make sure that you get, you try to adjust your sleep patterns as best you can. I know it's really tricky when you travel to certain places and you feel like you're wide awake at nighttime and you're like, oh, maybe I can use this time to get something done. I would say no. I would say take some melatonin, get to sleep so that you can wake up at the right time.
Well, listen, you use melatonin. I use Ambien. Ambien saved my career. When Paul first started to take me to Europe, I had the worst jet lag, and I would sleep for a week. And that meant that my work was terrible in the theater. And I went and I saw my doctor. He turned me on to Ambien, and it saved my career. Everyone needs something different. Some people take Xanax and it works. Some people take melatonin and it works. But the melatonin did not work for me. Ambien does. Also, a real quick tip. If you're doing any international traveling, make sure you get a global entry card. And that will ease your way through most of the customs in the world, that are friends with the United States. Especially when you come back into the U.S., you could just skip the entire customs line and just go right through. And it's very inexpensive. It's like $50 for 5 years. That's global entry.
Well, I always order the vegetarian meal because it's going to be the best meal on the airplane. Don't hesitate to take your shoes off, and your little sleep collar, put it on correctly. The padding goes under your chin, not behind your head. That's not where your head's going to fall. So I see all these people wearing their little sleep collars incorrectly, and they can't figure out why they're failing. Turn the darn thing around.
You are listening to Light Talk, and today Light Talk is sponsored by
Illegitimate Panda and the good men and women of IKEA. Illegitimate Panda and IKEA are making lighting history. Are you tired of the high price you have to pay to get yourself a decent moving light? Does it seem like your budget dollars and needs are moving in opposite directions? Well, kittens, you need the Suck 2000, the first moving light that doesn't break the bank. The Suck 2000 has all the features you need. CMY, shutter, zoom, strobe, color wheel, animation, gobos, and it's LED too. And at $500, it's a steal. How does Illegitimate Panda and IKEA do it? Simple. The Suck 2000 comes in kit form. That's right, all assembly is required. Now you and your students can share hours, days, weeks, months, maybe forever putting it together. Just follow those easy-to-understand IKEA instructions you know so well. From moving your daughter into the dorm and building that bookcase? How hard was that? Thanks, IKEA. All the tools you need are included. You get yourself a combo Allen wrench screwdriver and some wooden pegs. That's right, the parts from China and the instructions from Sweden. What could go wrong? And as a bonus, once you put 6 Suck 2000s together, you will have enough spare parts left over to build another. The Suck 2000, shipping now for Groundhog Day.
And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those rabid ducks tells us that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. Yes, and today's Let's Talk About is an interesting comment that we received from one of our listeners. And she wrote, "We talk about theater all the time, but let's talk about all the other things that have lighting and video. I have found that students are constantly asking me lately about what other kinds of work there is out there besides theater or live entertainment."
That's a great question. I get asked that all the time, too.
Yeah. So what do you say, Zach?
Well, it's been very interesting. As you guys know, at the end of last year, I joined the lighting design firm Visual Terrain and founded their new media department. And it's been really interesting and exciting because I'm now exposed to all the various things out there that they do in the lighting world that I never really thought about. Thinking about doing lighting for a parking garage, for instance, that, I just sort of thought about it like, I guess the architect places some lights in there, but I didn't know the thought behind that, the kind of fixtures that they might be, the color temperature that they are, things that are thought about in terms of safety and in terms of wayfinding to help guide people to where they need to go, solar powered things about lighting up the exteriors of buildings and how you integrate lighting in architecture. So these are all things that I've learned a lot about in the last few months that are completely non-theatrical lighting, but are a specialized form of lighting that a lot of my coworkers and collaborators have come from the theater world. So we're using that mindset of storytelling, but now we're applying it to how one might light a roller coaster or something like that. So I find it very interesting that all these things are out there that I never really thought about who comes up with those ideas and who creates that and who designs that.
Well, I think the other thing, too, is, if you're talking about building a career, I would say spend a little time as a lighting designer just walking around and looking at the mall, looking at the public library, looking at architecture, looking at landscape architecture. Look at all of these areas that actually use a lighting designer and need a lighting designer, and then kind of analyze it and see how good it is or how kind of mediocre it is. Because then you can go to a potential client and say, I can solve the problem here. I can solve the problem that you have in this dark corner, or I can solve the problem in this poorly lit exhibit space. I think you're right, Zach. I mean, lighting is all around us, and we just don't pay attention to it. We'll go back to the great Tharon Musser. Tharon told me that people don't use their eyes anymore. They think they know what a street light looks like. They think they know what a rainy sidewalk looks like. They think they know what a sunset looks like, but they're just complacent. They don't look at it. They don't look at the real thing and analyze it.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I think in theater, we're often called upon to sort of create the feeling of a street light or the feeling of the rainy sidewalk. But there's somebody out there has to actually choose a lighting fixture for that street light. Is it going to be solar powered? Is there going to be power there? These are all things that somebody has to have knowledge of and be hired to do and create and figure out how much light is enough light for this place for people to feel safe going back to their cars. I talked recently to a potential client who was saying they just took over a building in a downtown area and that the building lighting was boring and that they were worried they wouldn't be able to attract new tenants to their building because it kind of just disappeared next to all these other brightly lit, colorful buildings. And how could we help them make their building look more interesting with the hopes that people would be attracted to it in terms of coming in and renting office space? So, thinking about using your knowledge as a trained lighting designer, the things that you've learned about in theatrical storytelling for how to draw the eye, how to influence the blocking or the choreography. All those things can be applied in all these other settings. In the mall, you can use lighting to help direct people so they know where to go and what side of the corridor to walk on and things like that. So you have a lot of these skills, just, exactly what Steve is saying, that thinking about how they might be applied in other places besides the stage.
Well, we go back to poor Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
Everything you see, and I think this is something that Steve and Zach said, but it's worth repeating. Everything you see in life is part of your art. It's all part of what you use to create lighting atmospheres. So if you see something horrible in the mall, you're learning from that. How would I do this differently, right? I would be using LED instead of compact fluorescent, or I'd be using indirect light instead of direct light, things like that. And then all of a sudden you're lighting atmospheres in your mind, and then it's a lot easier when you hit projects like that. So yeah, there's a lot more to there's a lot more to lighting than video and theater. So go for it. And Steve has a final question of the day.
Timmy from Toledo writes, what was the worst weather you ever worked in?
Ooh, boy.
Okay. When I was really young and stupid, let me think about this. I think it was a Jerry Reed concert somewhere in Georgia, in an outdoor festival, and a kind of a junior third-class tornado hit. And things were falling over, towers were coming down, and the only safe place was under the stage. The stage was built like a rock. So I remember sitting under that stage going, this was a terrible career choice, and what were we doing? And I just hope I survive it. So I think a big, huge, nasty rainstorm with high winds, that outdoors, that's it. What about you guys?
I'm sure David has a lot of stories about this.
I do, unfortunately, but I'm trying to pick one. So Zach, you go first and let me pick one.
Okay. Well, I think of all this one is kind of a weird and unique one. And it involves Driscoll again. All my stories of danger and violent weather seem to involve Driscoll.
Maybe you'll learn something from that.
Yeah. Although everywhere I've been with him all over the world, he's found people from Texas, which is very interesting too. So we were working on a cruise ship in the lovely town of Bremerhaven, Germany, where the cruise ship factory is. So we're designing a show as the ship is being built. And we're in a ship that's maybe like 90% complete on the outside, at least. And the inside, it's probably a little less. And all of a sudden, a hurricane is coming through the North Sea. And for those who don't know about boats, which included me at the time, it is much safer for a cruise ship to be out at sea than in the shipyard, where the ferocious winds could actually cause it to smack against the dock in the shipyard and the little bar that was right next to the ship. And then they would lose their $3 billion investment rather than take their chances out in the ocean. So Driscoll and I actually were about to run to the grocery store, and they told us, go back to your rooms. We're about to leave. And the ship had never gone out to sail anywhere yet before because it was still being built. And we were sent out into the North Sea for 2 days. In these giant waves, in most of our cabins, the water was up above our windows, so we could see underwater out our cabins.
Scary.
And everybody was throwing up left and right because of the motion sickness. And needless to say, we didn't rehearse our show for a few days after that. And then we came back.
That's awful.
That sounds like some good bonding time with Driscoll there.
Well, yeah. And David, I know that you had mentioned on a previous episode about how I always try to capture my own stock footage.
Right.
So I do have extensive footage of the
Perfect.
waves in the sea,
Perfect.
so that if I ever do like an opera where there's a big storm,
Yeah,
I've got all the
but
footage.
The Flying Dutchman,
Poseidon Adventure.
the Poseidon, the musical,
Exactly.
and oh my God, but that's great. But okay, so my stories cannot beat that one. That's definitely the worst weather that I've ever heard of trying to work under those conditions. And I have several others, but the one I'm going to tell was way back when I was in undergrad school. I went to the University of Miami, and they had a theater that was a converted water tank with no air conditioning in it. And I did several summer seasons there where the humidity and the heat inside of this thing was so oppressive. We basically, were in our underwear hanging lights, girls and guys. It was just didn't matter. The sweat was dripping off of us. It was horrible. And what was worse is that this theater also wasn't grounded. So there were, if your wet hand would be hanging a light, and you'd be up on a metal ladder about 12 feet up in the air, you'd actually feel the electricity go through your body into the ladder down into the deck. And it was insane. It was totally insane. And we had about I think it was 4 or 5 auto transformer boards in a closet, and you couldn't see the stage. And we were all wrapped up against, with each other and basically naked in these rooms. There was nothing sexual about it because, believe me, it was so uncomfortable that the last thing in the world you were even interested in was anything sexual. But yeah, if I wonder if these co-eds, that their mothers would have seen the conditions that they were forced to work in, what would have happened. It was just nuts. So yeah, I would say that is absolutely the worst conditions I ever worked in. And when it rained, this is my favorite part because it rains every afternoon in Florida. There was a leak in the booth where the light boards were, it would fill up to your ankles, right? And so we would be standing in ankle deep water, working with electricity. And finally, they wouldn't fix this leak, and I just brought a drill up there and I drilled a hole right through the hatch, which basically was right above the lobby. So when the patrons came in, they were being, drowned by water. And then they fixed the leak, of course, but they didn't give a damn about the students. So yeah, that was the worst. Absolutely. There was also a festival at Vizcaya that was so bad, this is in South Miami, that there were so many mosquitoes that we were basically in danger of being killed by them, of dying by mosquito swarms. That was the second worst thing.
Well, we know that you should have had a mosquito pig with you.
The pig would have been taken. The pig would have been gone in minutes. We would have needed a herd of pigs. Well, the rocking sounds of the luminoids tells us that once again, you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, LiveDesignOnline.com, Amazon Prime Music, and just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to the podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the law firm of Flecht, Flock, Flair, and Glare and their paralegal, the world-famous Snoot, will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Washington, D.C., Long Beach, and the Republic of Texas.
And be sure to join us next week when we chat about more useless things and explore the crazy shenanigans in our industry.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Zach, Steve, and me. And bye-bye from Light Talk.
Bye-bye.
Lumen Brothers.